Hello everyone, tonight we are sinking into a story that drifts between snowflakes and secrets. A quiet hush settles over the earth. Outside your window, the night is cold and still. There's the faint rustle of trees swaying under the moonlight, their branches thin and trembling. Somewhere in the distance, a clock ticks, a soft, deliberate sound, like footsteps pacing a chapel floor. You're wrapped in warmth, perhaps the scent of chamomile tea lingers in the air, or the last breath of candlelight hovers near your skin. All is still, the kind of stillness that only asks one thing of you, to listen. Not with alertness, but with surrender. And in that soft surrender, we begin the tale of a bell that once hung high above a forgotten village, and then, one day, was simply gone. You may never know the end of this story. Somewhere between the snow and your dreams, the last lines may slip away from you. But that's alright, that's how good stories are meant to end. If you like this space and want to see me again on future nights, please like and follow. We have many more nights to tell stories together. And if you're still awake when the story ends, leave me a gentle comment with where you're listening from, and what time the night found you. I'd love to know who's out there with me, under the same stars. Now breathe slowly, let's begin. It's the winter of 1662, and the village of St. Eloy is buried in snow. You shuffle through the old cobbled square, boots crunching softly, scarf pulled tight to your chin. Somewhere beyond the veil of falling snow, you can hear water gurgling beneath the ice of the river Sereine. This is the sound the village sleeps to now. But it wasn't always so. Once, they slept to the sound of the great bell, Sereine, whose voice carried across the valley like a mother's lullaby. It rang each dusk and each dawn, keeping time for hearts that had long since forgotten to count their own beats. Until one night, it simply vanished. You pass by the stone arch of the abbey gate. The wooden sign creaks gently above you. No one walks the bell tower anymore. It stands empty, a pillar of stone wrapped in wind and legend. And yet, you can't help but look up, as if you glimpse a glint of brass catching the moonlight, or hear, faintly, the sound of ringing that shouldn't be. They say it happened during a storm. The sky cracked open in white flashes. The wind howled through the steeple, and when morning came, there was nothing left but the rope swinging gently, wet with snow. No bell, no trace, no sign of damage, no footprints in the powder, just silence, and St. Eloy was never quite the same. You make your way to the tavern. It's a small place, tucked beside the baker's shop, warm with amber light and the scent of mulled wine. Inside, the locals whisper about Sereine with a mix of reverence and suspicion. Old Claude, hunched near the hearth, swears it was the abbess herself who ordered it taken down, after her dreams grew haunted by its tolling. Others say it was stolen by soldiers in the night, melted down into cannonballs and medals during the wars of religion. A practical theory, almost too practical, because if that were true, why would people still hear it? Yes, they hear it. You've heard it yourself, haven't you? In that moment just before sleep, when the air goes still and your ears ring with the memory of quiet. A long, slow chime, not loud, not demanding, but impossibly clear, and always from the same direction, the lake. You leave the tavern just as a gust of wind kicks snow across your feet. You follow the road out past the chapel ruins, where moss devours old stone saints, down the slope where the trees thin into brambles, and the world opens wide around the frozen lake of Sereine. And there, under moonlight, it lies like glass, still, white, and perfectly silent, until it isn't. A single chime echoes across the ice. You freeze. It's not metallic, not like bells you've heard before. It's softer, deeper, like something submerged, singing from beneath. You step forward, breath fogging the air, eyes locked on the center of the lake where the sound came from. There's nothing there, of course there isn't, but you remember what one of the monks once said, long ago, after he returned from a hermitage in the northern forests. Not all things that disappear are gone. Some are just waiting until we forget them properly. You didn't understand what he meant then. Now, it makes you shiver. You keep walking the lake's edge. Somewhere beneath your boots, the ice groans faintly, as if remembering the weight of something that once lay heavy above it. Back in the village, stories say that during the winter of 1661, the last year the bell rang, the monks had begun to argue. Not loudly, but urgently. Some believed the bell had begun to ring at strange times. Even without the rope being pulled, One villager swore it chimed during the funeral of a man who hadn't yet died. Another said she heard it at midnight on Easter Sunday, when no monk was on watch. And then there was the boy, 10 years old, sharp-eyed and curious. He snuck into the tower one night during a storm. The next morning, he was found asleep at the base of the stairs. No injuries, but he never spoke again. His eyes would widen every time the bell rang after that. He died old, silent, and smiling. Historians still debate whether La Sereine ever truly existed. Records are sparse and oddly contradictory. One map from 1649 labels the tower as having no bell installed, while a traveler's letter from the same year describes being moved to tears by its melancholy tone. Theories abound. Some say it was a misremembered ship's bell brought inland. Others think it was an artifact from before the abbey, older, heavier, and perhaps not a bell at all. Tonight, as you stand beneath the old tower, the snow falls softer. You think you hear it again, that sound beneath sound. You close your eyes. Maybe it's just the wind in the trees. Maybe it's the blood in your ears. Or maybe the bell never laughed. Not really. You wake, or maybe you never really slept, standing at the edge of the lake as the morning mist curls low across the ice. The village is quiet now, almost too quiet. And you feel it again, that hum beneath your ribs, as if something ancient is vibrating through the earth, up into your spine. You take a step forward, boots crunching against the brittle snow, and glance back at the bell tower now silhouetted against the pale dawn. The stories have followed you all night, haven't they? The villagers call it le murmur, now, the whispering. It comes only in winter, only when the lake freezes solid. No bird song, no footsteps, just that low tone, like a thought you didn't mean to think. Some say it's the bell crying for air beneath the ice. Others believe it's the sound of regret, frozen and repeating itself in loops. You pause near an old willow tree, bent over from the years. Beneath it lies a stone with no name, just a carving of a bell cracked in half. Local children dare each other to touch it. You run your fingers along the cold granite and feel the ridge where the split was etched, not natural, not decorative, a break. Someone wanted that bell broken, not just physically, but in the memory of the town. And still, the sound returns every winter. A scholar once visited St. Eloy to study the phenomenon. Tall, reedy man with a notebook full of unreadable symbols. He asked about magnetic resonance and underground water currents, murmured something about acoustic mirages. He didn't stay long. After the third night, he packed his bags without a word and left a single phrase scribbled on the tavern wall. It sings because someone listens. Odd, yes, but not entirely wrong, because this isn't the only place where bells go missing. In 1417, during the Hussite Wars, a great bronze bell known as Judith's Voice was lowered from the cathedral in Prague and hidden from invaders. When they came, they found only the ropes and an empty frame. They called it cowardice, but legends say it rang 3 nights later in a town 50 miles away. No one knows how or why, but the villagers there claimed it cried like a widow. Closer to St. Eloy, in the town of Drancy, another bell vanished during a flood in 1733. The church survived, but the bell tower cracked, and the bell was never found. Fishermen swear they've heard it beneath the river ever since. Once a year, always during Lent, chimes underwater, ripples without wind. The Catholic records list it simply as displaced, which is perhaps the politest lie possible. Back in the present, a girl named Lila tells you she hears the bell when she dreams. She's only 12, but her drawings are uncanny. Curved towers, heavy ropes, and a symbol etched over and over again, a circle within a triangle, surrounded by drops of water. You recognize it. It matches an old emblem carved into the abbey's inner gate, the forgotten order of the Vox Perduta. The voice lost. You remember hearing about them once, an esoteric sect of monks who believed that sacred sound was a direct link to memory, to soul. They claimed certain bells could hold emotion, preserve it, even carry it across generations. They'd inscribe secrets into the alloy using whispered prayers while the metal cooled. And one of their last known bells was said to ring only when remembered with true longing. What happened to them? Most disappeared during the mid-1500s, persecuted for heresy by both church and crown. Their texts were burned, their bells confiscated, or so people thought. But what if one bell escaped? You follow a hunch, crossing the narrow bridge to the southern edge of the lake, where few people go. There, half buried in the snow, is a forgotten marker, an old stone slab, the kind used to anchor moorings for winter boats. But carved faintly into its face is a name, Sereine. It's not the name of the bell. It's the name of a boat. Your breath catches, you brush more snow aside, revealing a sketch. Two monks ferrying a large object across a body of water. Could it be that the bell was never hung in the tower at all? That it lived on the lake? A floating chapel, a floating choir? The theory is almost absurd. Almost. But in 1658, records show that during a plague outbreak, the monks of St. Eloy isolated themselves entirely. No visitors, no departures, and yet, they claimed to still ring the bell for the dead. From where? You look out across the frozen lake and imagine it, not a belfry, but a barge, low, wide, covered in snow, drifting quietly with the mist. A chapel of ice, a voice on water. Maybe the boat sank one sprain, too heavy with grief, or maybe it was pushed, because some sounds are not meant to survive. And still, it calls. Historians argue about this theory, of course. The main objection, bells don't float, but you've read the archives. You've seen the sketches. If the frame was wide enough, and the bell small enough, not the size of a cathedral's, but still deep-voiced, it might work. Especially if crafted by someone who knew how to bend bronze into something more than metal. Something alive. The wind picks up, snow flurries around your coat, and just as you turn to leave, you hear it again, low, clear, patient, the bell, and this time, it's closer. You don't move at first. You just stand there, breath held, as if afraid that even blinking will scare the sound away. But it lingers, a slow, gentle peal that doesn't cut through the air so much as wrap around it. You feel it more than hear it. In your chest, in the soles of your feet, somewhere, deep under the surface, something ancient is moving. You begin to walk again, slowly this time, back toward the village but keeping to the edge of the trees. The snow crunches softer now, as if even the ground is listening. You're not alone out here. Not really, not if something is answering from beneath the ice. At the far end of the lake, where the trees grow dense and the land dips into a hollow, there is an abandoned prayer house. You've seen it before, once just the ruins of stone and moss. A crumbled wall, a few broken pews under a collapsed roof. But this time, something's different. There's a light. It flickers faintly through the broken frame of what used to be a window. You edge closer, each step more cautious than the last, until you reach the door, or where a door once was. Inside, an old man sits by a fire. Not a monk, not a villager, just a man with a long beard and eyes that seem to reflect the color of snowfall. He doesn't seem surprised to see you. "Ah," he says without turning, "another dreamwalker come to hear her voice." You pause. "Her? Sereine," he says softly. The bell, she was cast in the shape of a woman's voice. Smooth, low, forgiving. You sit beside the fire. There's no sense in pretending you're not curious. And he begins to tell you the story, his version. There was a time, he says, when bells were not tools, but guardians. Each had a spirit, a memory etched into its tone. Sereine was born from sorrow. Cast during the famine of 1581, her bronze was mixed with coins given by starving villagers, offerings. They said, to feed the soul if not the body. You close your eyes, listening. They say when the bell first rang, it rained for 7 days. Crops revived, children were born healthy again. But there was a cost. There's always a cost. He leans closer to the fire, voice dropping to a whisper. Each time she rang, someone dreamt of drowning. You open your eyes. Is that why she was hidden? No, he replies. She was hidden because of what she knew. The silence that follows is heavy, like the moment after thunder. He goes on. In 1642, during the war over the northern pass, a group of monks fled with Sereine. They believed she held voices of the dead, coded messages embedded in the reverberation. So they rang her not just to mark time, but to ask questions, to listen. You look out at the lake again, and someone didn't like the answers. Perhaps, or perhaps they were never supposed to ask. He smiles then, not kindly, but gently. What people fear most is not silence. It's the wrong kind of truth. You think of the other bells, the ones that vanished across Europe. The bell of St. Brieuc, lost during a solar eclipse. The twin bells of the Danube that rang together from opposite ends of the river and then went silent on the same day. Always the same story, disappearance, rumors, memory blurred, and always in places where people listened too closely. The old man offers you a drink, warm, thick, and spiced with something you can't name. As you sip, your mind grows heavier, thoughts thicker, like melting wax. He continues speaking, his words flowing now like music, a lullaby wrapped in history. There's a legend, he says, that one day, when all the lost bells ring together in the same moment, time will bend backwards, not like turning back a clock, no, but like remembering something we were never supposed to forget. That sound, it's an anchor. You ask quietly, an anchor to what? He shrugs, whatever you left behind. You wake with a jolt. You're no longer in the prayer house. You're standing on the frozen lake again, alone, snow swirling in soft spirals around your boots. No footprints, no firelight, no sign of the man. But in your hand, a small bronze charm, shaped like a bell, and faintly, across the lake, the chime rings again. You turn back toward the village, mind reeling. You need answers, real ones. This time, not legends, not lullabies, something you can hold on to. And there's only one place left to look. The Abbey archives. It takes time, of course. Monasteries guard their secrets tightly, even when their walls have crumbled. But you know someone who might help. Sister Aurelie, the last of the order still living in the region. You find her in a hospice near the hills, tending to the sick with quiet hands and distant eyes. When you mention the bell, she stiffens slightly but nods. Sereine, she says, I heard her once, in my youth. I wasn't supposed to, but I did. She gives you an old key. Brass, cool to the touch. The archives are beneath the library. Locked for decades, no one bothers anymore. But if you're meant to hear her, maybe you're meant to know why. Back in St. Eloy, you make your way to the Abbey library. Dust dances in the shafts of light. The air smells of paper and candle wax. You descend the spiral stairs, each creak echoing like a question. The key turns in the lock with a reluctant click. Inside are stacks of parchment, boxes of wax-sealed scrolls, and in the center, something covered in linen. You pull the fabric back gently and gasp. It's a bell, but not Sereine. Smaller, cruder, a prototype. Beside it, a ledger, dated 1656. Inside, notes about a project. Replication attempts, failed resonance. Original cast lost, memory imprint incomplete. Then a final line, smudged with age. Only the original sings back. And just below that, a sketch of a lake, with a cross marked deep in its center. You don't need to ask what it means, because tonight, you'll go there, and maybe, just maybe, you'll hear her answer again. You return to the lake under moonlight, guided not by logic anymore, but by rhythm, by memory. The trees rustle in low breaths. The sky is stretched fabric of stars, and the surface of the frozen water lies still as glass. Somewhere deep inside you, that low resonance continues, like a name you can almost remember. In your coat pocket, the small bronze charm warms slightly, though the wind bites through your layers. You pause at the shoreline, your breath rising in soft clouds, and scan the ice for the spot marked in the ledger, a cross carved just at the lake's center. It's far, and the ice is thin this late in the season, but it's the only way. You step out, testing each footfall. The sound is brittle, delicate, ice cracks like old pages folding. You shuffle slowly, then faster as your confidence grows. Behind you, the trees fade into the mist. Ahead, only silver and silence. Then, a shadow. Just beneath the surface, faint, barely there, but unmistakable. A rain, a structure, metal, distorted by the icy veil above it. You kneel, placing a palm flat against the glassy surface. And there it is again, that hum. You're sure of it now. It's not imagined, it's not memory, it's real. The bell is beneath the lake, not lost, waiting. You take out the charm, hold it close to your chest. It seems to respond, vibrating ever so slightly, in sync with the sound below. And as the vibration grows, the air around you seems to change, thicker, slower, as if time is listening too. You lie flat against the ice. Your breath fogs the surface. And from below, rising through the water like a voice underwater calling home. You hear it clearly now. A sequence, not just a toll, but notes, almost a melody. It is mournful, but also forgiving. Suddenly, a memory flashes through your mind, not yours, but someone else's. A boy climbing the tower stairs. A monk whispering over a crucible of molten bronze. A woman weeping as a rope is cut. These aren't dreams, they're echoes, embedded, preserved, embedded in the bell. You pull back quickly, heart racing. You've heard of this. Oral memory was one thing, but tonal memory, that was the old heresy. That sound could carry knowledge, emotion, even will. The forbidden belief that a bell could be more than metal, that it could choose who hears it. Back on shore, you scramble to the old forge ruins behind the abbey. It's barely more than a crumbled wall and a rusted anvil now, overgrown with ivy, but beneath a loose slab of stone, you find it. A journal wrapped in waxed cloth. The writings are obsessive, the forger's notes. He speaks of memory alloys, of mixing not only metals but experiences. That each component of the bell came from a gift, coins from mourners, jewelry from the lonely, even a blade from a deserter. That the alloy would carry those emotions, that when wrong, it would give them back. Over and over, to whoever dared listen. You realize now, Sereine wasn't just a bell. She was a library of human feeling, grief, forgiveness, fear, devotion, all blended and frozen in sound. And someone feared what she would reveal. You read on. He speaks of a betrayal. The bell was meant to be consecrated, but before the ritual, a noble woman demanded it be silenced. She had heard it chime during a private prayer that brought her to tears. Not because it hurt her, but because it knew. It knew what I asked for, and it rang as if it answered. That terrified her, so she paid the monks to sink it. Better to erase what you cannot explain. Your fingers grip the page. The story is almost too perfect, but it aligns. You return once more to the lake's edge, now committed, now aware. You must hear the full sound, not a memory, not an echo, the full voice of the bell. But how? Then you remember the story from Prague, a bell that rang from afar, not pulled, not struck, just heard, because someone remembered. So you sit, on the ice, in silence, and you remember. You remember the stories, the pain etched into bronze, the laughter woven in molten metal. You remember those who died never knowing their lives were stored in sound. And slowly, impossibly, she answers. The ice beneath you does not crack. The water below does not bubble. But your ears, your chest, your very breath fills with sound. Deep, warm, endless. A bell that tolls not for warning or worship, but for being. And in that sound, you feel it. Peace. You cry, you laugh, you remember everything and nothing. Because it isn't yours, but it's real. Then slowly, the sound fades. You open your eyes. The sun is rising. Birds call from the trees. The wind has stopped. And beneath you, only silence. You rise, walking back toward the village. You're not empty. You're not confused. You are full, as if something was given to you and taken at the same time. And behind you, beneath the surface of the lake, Sereine sleeps again, waiting for someone else to remember. The thaw comes quietly that year. You hardly notice it at first, the way the snow softens. The way icicles shrink into clear drops that patter against stone. The lake, which had groaned under your feet just weeks ago, now sighs under a film of melt. You walk its edges, watching patches of earth reappear like forgotten pages in a book left out in the rain. Near the abbey tower, where the trees thin and the ground slopes gently toward the reeds, something catches the morning light. A glint, not snow, not water. You kneel down. It's metal, half buried in the damp soil. Tangled with brittle grass, lies a chunk of something warped in dark bronze, maybe, or iron scorched by fire. You tug gently, and it resists at first, then gives with a wet gasp of mud. It's not whole, a fragment, charred, twisted, and strangely heavy for its size. At first glance, it looks like nothing. But then you turn it slightly and catch the edge of a symbol, part of a circle. A faint raised line. You've seen this before. It matches the bell sketch in the Abbey archives. You bring it back to the library, laying it out on a broad wooden table beneath shafts of dusty sunlight. The curvature of the metal, the thickness, the subtle markings. It's not from an everyday object. It's not part of a tool or carriage wheel. No, this belonged to a casting, a large one, a bell. But this one is strange. The metal is darker than it should be. Oxidized, yes, but also mottled, almost like it had been through more than just time. Heat, intense heat, maybe from a fire, or maybe from something else. As you examine it, a monk, Father Jean, watches from the stacks. He says nothing for a long while, then speaks without turning his head. They said the bell burned once. You look at him. Bells don't burn. No, he replies, finally meeting your gaze, but they can be made to. He tells you a story, one whispered among the older brothers, that during the winter of 1680, after weeks of the bell ringing at odd hours, chiming with no one near the ropes, the monks feared it had become corrupted, possessed, or worse, awakened. One night, during Mass, the bell rang violently on its own, splitting the air like a scream. They say the sound shattered a stained glass window. After that, they tried to dismantle it, but it wouldn't come down. So they tried something else. There was an accident, of course. That's what the records say. A fire in the bell tower. Dry wood, lightning, but Jean is certain it wasn't nature. It was a ritual. They set the tower ablaze from within, not to destroy the bell, but to silence it. And yet, no remains were ever found. No shards, no metal, just soot, until now. You run your hand over the surface of the fragment again. It's warm, but not from the sun, as if it holds the memory of the fire. Historians would love this, the chance to prove the fire was real, that the bell had been burned, but they'd miss the point, because the real question isn't whether the bell was destroyed. The real question is, what else was? Later that evening, you walk through the ruined base of the bell tower. The air smells of moss and old ash. A few stones still bear black stains. Centuries old, you pace in slow circles, retracing where the ropes once hung. Something itches at the back of your neck. A hum, not of sound, but of space. You remember what the forger's note said, only the original sings back. If that fragment is from the original bell, then it should carry resonance. A tone, a signature. You return to the forge site and test it. Just a tap with a mallet against a wooden brace. It doesn't ring, not at first, but then, a pulse, a vibration that spreads into your palm. Low, like the beginning of a hum. You try again, the same thing. The bell fragment responds, but not with noise. With feeling, emotion, if that's possible. This isn't just alloy, it's memory made metal. Back at the abbey, you find a floor panel loose beneath the choir stalls. Beneath it, wrapped in cloth and sealed with wax, is another piece, longer, curved, clearly part of the bell's rim, and along the inside, engraved so finely it's almost invisible, are lines of text, not Latin, not French, a personal language, a cipher. You photograph it, record every curve and indentation. You'll need help decoding it. But for now, one phrase seems to rise above the rest, embedded in a spiraling pattern around the edge. Her voice is the sum of the unheard. And suddenly, everything sharpens. This wasn't just a bell. This was a container of words unspoken, prayers unfinished, memories denied voice. It wasn't just about hearing. It was about witnessing. And someone didn't want that. Because to hear those voices, to remember them, was to undo forgetting. And forgetting is the most powerful kind of silence. You return to your room that night with the fragments wrapped carefully in cloth. Outside, the last of the snow has melted. The soil smells rich, almost sweet, but in the distance, thunder. Something is coming, and the bell, even in pieces, knows. The storm doesn't arrive that night. It waits, the air thickens, the trees sway as if warning one another. And inside your room at the Abbey guest house, the fragments of the bell sit on the windowsill wrapped in linen, casting faint metallic reflections against the wooden frame. You barely sleep, not because of fear, but anticipation. You know something else is buried in this village, something that predates even the monk's silence. You wake early, light seeps through the shutters in soft gray waves, and the bell fragment vibrates slightly beneath your palm as you gather your notes. Your next destination is the château on the hill, the once regal home of the Comtesse de Lenvers, a minor noblewoman from the late 1600s with a name often whispered but never explained in the Abbey records. The château is half ruined now. Ivy devours the arches, birds nest in what was once a ballroom, but the library remains, hidden behind a cracked wooden panel near the hearth. Just as Sister Aurelie had hinted, it's dusty, dark, and lined with narrow folios sealed in twine. You sort through them slowly. and one catches your eye. Parchment in a silk wrap, marked normally with a crest, an inverted bell beneath the crown. Inside is a royal decree. It's brief, sharp, a direct order to halt all restoration of the auditory relic housed at St. Eloy. Signed not by Cain, but a queen, Queen Madeleine of Charente. Her reign was brief, her influence understated, but her signature, delicate, precise, is unmistakable. You read it again. The instrument of remembrance must not ring again. Let silence preserve the peace we purchased in blood. Below that, in smaller writing, perhaps not meant to be seen, someone has scribbled a note. Return denied. The bell hears too much. You sit back. What peace? What price? The bell wasn't just silenced for fear or superstition. It was political, strategic, a weapon of memory. You dig deeper into the drawer and find an old letter. Brittle with time, it's from a woman, anonymous, but the handwriting matches the Queen's. She writes of her time at the Abbey in secret, of nights spent beneath the tower, of dreams disturbed by the bell's tolling. It echoed not only what I said, but what I thought, the truth I buried, the guilt I held. It knew, and it made me listen. There's a pain in those lines, raw, shrouded in formality. You wonder what she was hiding, what war she meant, what blood was paid. Then a second document slips from the folio, an inventory ledger. Items given to the Abbey for safekeeping. Among them, one golden icon, one vial of tears, and finally, a gift from the Queen, voice cast, unnamed. You freeze. She didn't just sign the order. She funded the bell's forging. A secret offering, meant to embody something personal. Maybe penance, maybe prophecy, maybe a confession no one else could hold. But once it began to speak, too clearly, too closely, she tried to bury it. You leave the château as the wind begins to rise. The valley seems to curl inward. Trees bend, windows groan, something is stirring. Back in the village, an old historian named Armand greets you by name. He's never spoken to you before. You've been asking about the bell. He says, voice low, I was told to give you this if you ever made it this far. From beneath his coat, he hands you a key. Rusted, delicate, not shaped like any door key you've seen. You'll know the lock when you find it. You return to the Abbey with the key in your palm. It's light, but feels heavy with implication. You search every floor, every corridor, until you find it. A recess in the stone behind the altar. Barely visible, the key fits. The compartment slides open. Inside, a scroll, a map, not of the village, of residence fields, concentric circles overlaid on the lake, the tower, and oddly, on the Queen's old chambers at the château. Lines of tone, layers of sound, notes labeled with letters not from any known scale. And in the center, one small dot, labeled simply, Origin. You trace it with your finger. It's not at the lake, not at the Abbey. It's beneath the old road between the two, where no one builds. Where the ground sinks ever so slightly. The map includes an instruction. Should the bell's voice return, bury what remains here, let her rest in soil, not sound. But no one did. They burned the tower, they scattered the parts, but they never returned the voice. And perhaps that's why it still rains. You fold the map carefully and tuck it inside your coat. You glance back toward the window. Snow is gone, thunder rolls in the distance. And far off, just beneath the rush of wind, that chime, not angry, not mournful, just persistent. And tonight, you plan to go where the map leads. To the origin, because some gifts, no matter how well hidden, will always ring again. You leave just before dusk, the map folded tightly in her coat pocket, boots echoing faintly against the stone floor of the Abbey as you step into the open air. The sky is a gauzy mix of gray and lavender, clouds low and uncertain. Beneath it, the road winds gently downhill, past bramble and weathered trees. No one walks this stretch anymore. The village avoids it, not from fear, exactly, but a kind of inherited habit, as if silence taught their feet to forget the way. The path to the origin is subtle, barely more than a dip between hills. Now overgrown with stubborn weeds and half-frozen soil, you descend into it slowly, guided more by instinct than sight, until you feel it. A strange pressure in the air, not sound, but the memory of it, like walking into a room where someone just whispered your name. The ground is softer here, unnaturally so. You kneel and press your palm against the earth. There's warmth beneath the top layer. A pocket of air, maybe, or something else. You dig gently with a small trowel, brushing aside roots and clay until you hit stone, then wood, then something else. You uncover a lid, iron-framed, set into the ground like a hatch. The ring handle is cold, but not rusted, protected, preserved. You pull it open slowly, and the hinges moan in protest. A chill exhales from below. Stairs lead downward. Stone steps spiral into darkness, cut roughly into the bedrock. You descend with care, each echo bouncing slightly longer than expected, as if the sound has trouble letting go. At the bottom, a narrow chamber opens, arched ceiling, shelves carved directly into the walls. Dust floats like mist in your lantern's glow. And at the far end, a forge, not just any forge, a compact sanctuary of tools and tones. Chisels aligned in size, bells in miniature, suspended from strings, vials of old powders and melted metal. But most striking of all, a large mold, cracked but intact, shaped in a way that mimics the body of a human throat. A place not for making bells, but for making voices. You run your fingers across its surface. Carvings, scores, like musical notation, but stranger, jagged at the edges. Irregular, personal. This is where she was made. The forger of voices. You don't know his name. No one does, but his journal lies nearby, bound in dyed leather, the first page smeared with soot. She was never meant to be loud. It begins, only heard by those who carried silence inside them. You read on. His notes are obsessive, detailed. He speaks of tuning, not the bow. But the listener, that certain sounds could unlock memory, emotion, even revelation, if cast from metals imbued with sentiment. He describes the process. Coins donated by a widow at her husband's grave. A sword surrendered by a soldier on the eve of desertion. Jewelry from a woman who never married. He melted them all together. Not for purity, for contrast. The blend was the point. Only contradiction creates resonance. You close your eyes. He goes on. The bell was cast during a full lunar eclipse. The metal sang as it cooled. The notes were tested not with hammers, but with whispers, his own, reciting stories of people who would never speak again. And when she was first rung, the tone didn't just echo. It answered. You stand slowly, bones creaking. The forge seems to hum faintly as you move. Not with sound, with presence, a kind of heat that doesn't come from fire. You turn to the final page of the journal. A confession. I was warned that giving her a voice meant giving her a will. I thought I was only crafting sound, but I made a witness. She remembers everything, and beneath it, etched in the cover leather. If she ever falls silent, you've forgotten who you are. You step back from the forge and look around once more. On a side shelf, something gleams, a small bell, unfinished, raw, with no clapper, but when you touch it, it hums, just briefly, as if acknowledging you. You don't take it. Instead, you extinguish the lantern and climb the steps back into the fading light. The wind has changed, warmer now, but underneath, a whisper you recognize, the tone of bronze not struck, but remembered. She was forged not to command, but to remind. Back in the village, the people begin to speak of dreams again, of hearing bells in sleep, of remembering things they never lived, of tears shed for reasons they can't name. You don't explain, but the forge beneath the hills is no longer empty, and the voice she gave to memory has stirred again. The storm finally comes, not with violence, but with purpose. Thick clouds descend from the ridge like a curtain drawn across the sky, and the wind carries a hush that wraps around the village like a veil. It rains without thunder, just steady, relentless sheets that soak through stone and soul alike. You stand at the edge of the abbey grounds, staring up at the bell tower. What's left of it, even in ruin, it still looms, scarred, leaning ever so slightly, but not fallen, not yet. Its upper reaches long collapsed, the wood blackened and brittle, but the base remains stubborn, as if it remembers its purpose. Today, you intend to climb it. No one else comes near. Most believe the structure is unstable. Others believe it's cursed, but you believe something different now. That the fire wasn't meant to destroy. It was meant to cleanse, or to silence, or maybe to seal. You begin your ascent slowly. The stairwell is narrow, the steps uneven with moss and age. Wind whistles through the open cracks. The stone is slick with rain, and every creak of the structure feels like a warning. But the higher you go, the stronger the pulse beneath your ribs. It's not fear, it's memory. Halfway up, a blackened support beam blocks your path. You crawl beneath it, brushing against ash-stained stone. You reach the platform, the chamber where the bell once hung. Or should have. Instead, there is only the scorched skeleton of the old wooden yoke. No ropes, no clapper, but across the walls, barely visible under layers of soot and time marks. Not drawings, not carvings, handprints, charred, overlapping, human size, some large, some small, some reaching upward, others pressed flat against the walls, as if holding something in. You reach out, place your own hand beside them. The stone is cool, but for an instant warm. Like breath, you remember what the forger wrote. I made a witness. What happened here wasn't accidental. The fire was orchestrated, and you begin to see why. You notice a metal bracket still bolted to the wall. Not part of the structure. It's newer, perhaps added during the fire itself. It holds a charred box, long since fused shut. You pry gently with a blade. Inside, a small scroll, preserved by the tight seal. The ink is faded, but readable. She began to speak names we had not told her. Names of men who had not died yet. We rang her in mourning, but she rang in warning. The monks had feared something far beyond superstition. The bell had begun to predict. You sit back on your heels. The fire wasn't just a silencing. It was a rebellion, against prophecy, against knowing, because when a bell tells the future begins to listen. Outside, the wind changes, rain becomes mist, the air thickens with that same pressure, the weight of sound that hasn't yet happened. And somewhere, far below, you hear it again, a chime, but this time, it's different, shorter, sharper, not a song, a summons. You descend the tower faster than you climbed it, heart pounding not from fear, but understanding. You pass villagers on your way through the square. They nod, unaware of what's shifting just beneath their feet. You follow the sound toward the chapel ruins at the edge of the woods. There, where a small altar once stood, the ground has split, not wide, just enough to see that something lies beneath. Not earth, not stone, metal, bronze, slick with rain. You kneel and clear the debris, hands trembling. It's not the original bow. It's a piece, the missing segment, the part that would have held the clapper. You lift it gently. It hums, and in the silence that follows, you hear a voice, not in your ears, in your mind. I was not made to predict. I was made to remember. You stagger back. This isn't magic. This is design. The forger built a conduit, not of sound, but of resonance. And when too many voices pass through something meant to be still, it becomes something else. A memory engine. That's what the Sereine became. You return the fragment to the forge chamber that night. It belongs there, back where it began. The fire didn't end her, it splintered her. And now the pieces call to each other. The question is, what happens when they reunite? Because the hum grows louder. Not just in you, in the village. Children wake in the night whispering names they've never heard. The clock tower rings before the hour. A blind man at the tavern begins reciting verses from lost abbey texts. Sereine is remembering, and she is sharing, one voice at a time. You wake with the name of a stranger on your lips. You don't remember dreaming, but you know the name wasn't yours. It echoes for a moment, foreign, ancient, intimate. You write it down without knowing why. Then another comes, and another, names you've never read, never heard aloud. You check the abbey records. One by one, they appear, former monks, midwives, stonecutters, the forgotten and the erased. Sereine is not just remembering. She is returning what was lost. You feel it in the village, too, in the way people pause mid-conversation, brows furrowing, as if their minds have tripped over a memory that wasn't there a moment before. A child hums a tune no one taught them. A dying woman whispers the confession of another. The air is full of echoes, not from the past, but from somewhere beside it. It begins to dawn on you. This may not be a bell at all. The remaining fragments rest now in the forge, 3 curved pieces. One central segment, and the scorched rim you unearthed. You line them together like puzzle parts. The curve is wrong, it's too organic, too irregular. Then you remember what the forger wrote. I made a witness, I shaped her after the throat, not the tower. And it clicks. This wasn't meant to chime. It was meant to speak. You search the forger's chamber again and find the final piece. a sketch buried beneath layers of wax paper notes. Not a bell, not exactly. It resembles a human larynx, elongated, metallic, hollowed and shaped to mimic resonance chambers of the skull and chest. A mechanical voice box, not for announcing time but for storing it. Sereine was never a bell in the traditional sense. She was an instrument, a living archive, a shell for the echoes of lived moments. You remember how you felt when you first heard her toll, not fear. Not awe, but something like belonging. The sound didn't fill the room. It filled you. And now she's waking. But there's a cost. The abbey librarian tells you quietly that 2 monks have fallen ill. Not with fever, with silence. They no longer speak, not because they can't, but because, as one wrote on a scrap of paper, there are too many voices. You worry the fragments are resonating too strongly, that their pull is no longer passive, that they are searching for something, or someone. Then you remember the Queen's decree. Let silence preserve the peace we purchased in blood. You think back to the confessional scroll hidden in the bell tower. The bell ringing names no one had spoken. Of deaths yet to happen. Of sins no one had voiced. What if this wasn't prophecy? What if it was record-keeping? A machine that stored not just memories, but secrets, unspoken thoughts, hidden guilt, quiet joys, confessions no one dared speak aloud. And what if someone had figured that out? You return to the map from the hidden drawer, the concentric circles of resonance. There's a faint overlap you missed before, between the bell's origin point and the catacombs beneath the abbey. You descend again, deeper this time, past the official chambers, into the unlit tunnels. You find a door blocked by stacked stones, not sealed with bricks or mortar, just wedged. Hastily, as if by someone in a panic, you remove the rocks carefully and push it open. Inside, silence so thick it feels alive. It's not large, just a chamber with shelves, candles long gone cold, and a chair. In the center sits a relic, a headpiece, metallic and curving, like the top arc of a bell, but designed not to hang, to wear. You freeze. This was never a communal instrument. It was a personal one. The wearer became the clapper. The sound came not from outside force, but intention. The bell was a listener. And the person wearing it, the transmitter. Your hands tremble as you realize what this means. Sereine wasn't forged to tell time. She was built to tell truth. Raw, unchecked, and complete. And that is why she had to be buried. Not for the voices she held, but for what they revealed. For what they threatened. The abbey didn't fear prophecy. They feared justice. They feared what would happen if every lie rang out in the open. You lift the headpiece slowly. It is heavy, humming softly. A voice flickers in your mind, not words. Just a feeling, like the edge of a memory returning. You don't put it on. Not yet. You carry it back to the forge. The fragments are waiting. They hum in response. Low, deliberate, unified. And now you know, when assembled, she won't ring. She'll speak. The question is, are you ready to listen? Night comes softly. No lightning, no fanfare. Just the slow folding of light into shadows as the village slits beneath the hush of dusk. Candles flicker behind stone windows. A lone dog barks once. Then nothing. You walk the familiar path to the forge, heart pacing evenly with your steps, as if it too has heard the rhythm waiting ahead. The bell is whole now. Not perfectly, its surface bears scars. The seams where the fragments rejoined remain visible, but it stands. Balanced, centered, not hanging from rafters or mounted in stone, but resting upright on a cradle of oak. The same cradle described in the final sketch within the forger's journal. She has no rope, she never needed one. You stand before her, head bowed slightly, feeling the way her presence presses gently into the air. There is no sound, but every breath you take feels like it echoes. This moment does not demand noise. It demands stillness. In your hands, the headpiece. You run your fingers along its smooth inner curve. It is warm, not from fire or sunlight, but from something deeper, anticipation, perhaps, or memory ready to rise. You hesitate. The Queen had worn this once. So had the forger. You wonder what it gave them, and what it took. But then you remember the names, the dreams, the voices. You place the headpiece over your crown, and suddenly, silence breaks, not with a chime, with breath. It floods you, not like a rush of wind, but like an exhale held for centuries finally released into your lungs. You stagger slightly, eyes fluttering shut. Then you hear it, a child's laughter, a funeral chant, a whispered confession of love never spoken aloud. You hear hammer on bronze, a widow's final prayer, the scrape of boots on monastery stone. You hear joy, and terror, and shame, and forgiveness, all woven together like threads braided through time. You see the monk who rang her one last time before the fire. The queen, seated in a stone chapel, asking no one, "Did I make the world worse?" The forger pressing his ear to the cooling metal, hoping to hear his daughter's voice again. You open your eyes, the forge is gone, not physically, but your vision, your awareness, has left the room. You stand beneath the lake now, or above it, or within the sound of it. You are in a memory that was never yours, and yet it welcomes you like a home you forgot you built. Then she speaks, not in words, in you. The feeling blooms from chest to throat, not as a command, but a question. Are you ready to carry what they left? And the answer isn't yes or no. It's tears, silent, hot, right, because you understand now. The bell never needed to toll. She needed to be held, witnessed, remembered, and now, she is. You remove the headpiece slowly. The forge reappears. The floor is cold again. The sound fades to a hum. But something has shifted, in you, around you. When you walk outside, the rain has stopped. The village is still, but here and there, you notice it, soft signs. A widow humming an old hymn. A boy holding his grandfather's war medal, staring at it like it's speaking. A bell, tiny and ornamental, hanging in the bakery window, trembling slightly though there's no wind. And then, one chime, far away. No one flinches, no one looks. They feel it. You step into the square as the sky clears. Stars blink awake, and for a moment, nothing moves. Then the breath comes back into the world. You smile. You don't need to tell them. They already know. They don't remember when they heard the bell last, but they'll never forget how it felt. Because now, you are the bell, and you will carry the sound forward, not in noise, but in presence, in silence made sacred by understanding. You close your eyes one last time, standing in the hush that follows the toll. And then, slowly, you begin to walk. Let the story ring again. Blank, underscore, blank. You're still here, somehow. The room around you is quiet now, so quiet that even the softest breath feels like it fills the world. Your body is still, your thoughts, softer. The story lingers not as sound, but as sensation, a resonance in your chest that hums just beneath the surface of sleep. You may not remember every part by morning. You may forget the names, the forge, the storm. That's okay. That's how memory works. It leaves behind only what we're meant to keep. So let the rest fade. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your breath deepen. The story is no longer something you listen to. It's something you entered. You were there, on the frozen lake, in the echoing forge, beneath the rain. And now, it's with you, like a soft bell tucked into your ribs. Quiet, present, waiting. You don't have to understand it all. You don't have to explain. You just have to rest. The world will still be here when you wake. The stars will still spin. The bell will still ring, gently. Always gently, just behind the eyes, where dreams form. Let go now. Let yourself drift. There's nothing left to do but sleep. And maybe, just maybe, if you listen closely in the night, you'll hear her again. Good night.